solving one problem in a startup just earns you the right to solve a bigger problem.
Maybe give us kind of a bit of a picture on your story.
All I've known professionally is early stage investing. Just started working out of this River City Labs. It's a co-working space in Brisbane. I actually started a pre-seed fund, and then after that fund, that's when I joined Blackbird. And it was just so energizing. Like, you looked at the clock, never. I just really learned that that's what I loved.
I think that you're always interested in tech, startups.
There was just that energy you get. You know, when you work with your team, like, we're
It's
changing
infectious.
the world in
It's
some way. We're
infectious.
building something new.
What traits do you look for?
You've got to be, one, curious, but also this learn it all. Speed and taste are very much important. I think those things, they're permanent. They existed when Steve Jobs started Apple, and they exist today, and they're just as important as when he started Apple.
What do you think is the most underrated trait of successful founders you work with today?
You have to be deeply motivated by winning. And I think when you combine that with just being a great human, that compounds, and then, you create someone that can be a generational CEO.
Max, thanks for coming on the podcast. Excited to have you on. I mean, I feel like you've been through a thick and thin of Instant and the journey. And so many people, I know if you read LinkedIn or the press, you think Instant is up and to the right, all the time. But it's been far from that along the way. And I feel like you're one of the very few people that have truly seen the journey. So excited to have you on. But we were just chatting before the podcast, like where we actually met for the first time. We're both from Brisbane. I mean, give a kind of your recount on how we first crossed paths. Quite a long time ago now, right? I think I was 17.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Liam. I'm excited to be here. It's always a thrill chatting with you. I grew up in Adelaide, but actually spent like my later teenage years and studying university up in Brisbane, and I just was getting involved in the startup community up in Brisbane. It's much more nascent up there. And one of the great programs that was being run at the time was Mark Orchard's BDO Startups program. And it was one of the only places where startups kind of came together in a more formal, maybe informal way as well. But it was in BDO's, office building way up in the air. And I walk into this room full of like 20 startups, and there's one particular startup group called Quick Checkout at the time. And turns out that was you. The logo was like a fox or an orange fox.
It's like an orange fox head logo.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that, is so important in early stage founders is just like this speed, obsession, focus. And out of like the 20 founders in the room, it was clear that, albeit as a 17-year-old, you had this crazy obsession with what you were doing, and it made sense from like your marketing, your website, your e-commerce, drop shipping, all the way up. And the story, I mean, it was only a 5-minute chat, and we were just reminiscing on, we don't actually remember a whole lot of it, but we remember the name, the logo, and that's where we both met for the first time. This was before we raised capital. This was before we, had an office in Sydney. The good old days.
That was crazy. I mean, I remember most having they gave everyone a name tag, and mine obviously said Liam, and then under it, Quick Checkout. And this was just around the same time that one of our biggest competitors, Fast, ended up being called Fast, was previously called something like Bypass, because their product was bypassing the checkout. And then they renamed to Fast, and we were called Quick. And I'm like, fuck this, we actually need to be Instant. So I remember that same day at this event, crossed out my name tag where it said Quick and replaced it with Instant for the first time. I think it was like a multi-day course, and by the end of it, my business name was Instant, which is kind of where it's ended up today. And then another event where we met each other soon after was at Schedulo's office, speaking on stage together and kind of sharing the early journey of Instant, which was really, I think, like 6 or 12 months later.
Yeah.
And by this point, Blackbird had invested in our pre-seed round. But maybe prior to Blackbird and before we get into your journey there, maybe give us kind of a bit of a picture on your story. Grew up in Adelaide, moved to Brisbane.
Yeah.
You're involved in... kind of give us a bit of a
and just on the story of Fast and Instant, maybe one crazy cool anecdote in there was during the Blackbird process, I remember we asked like, how are you, different to Fast? And you were like, you just paused, and it was just so mature of you. And then you just said, "We're not fast, we're instant." And it was a bit of a banger moment. But yeah, to get into a little bit of my background, it's all I've known professionally is early stage investing, and during my university days, I was working out what I wanted to do, like any young person, going through the idea maze of, I was studying law and commerce, hated every corporate job that I was kind of like, everything seemed to be this linear journey that pushed you into internships, in clerkships, and it almost felt like a funnel for universities to meet their job targets really easily and be like, hey, our employment rate out of university is X%. And it was just like this easy way to push people out. And all of them I was super conflicted with. Anyway, I just started working out of this River City Labs. It's a co-working space in Brisbane. And just was working as like a free operator for some startups based out of there. And anyway, met another person that was working in there that was like Steve Baxter was running it at the time, had an accelerator in there. And this is how I got exposed to like literally $100,000 work on the idea. And it was just so energizing. Like you looked at the clock, never. You just got to the end of the day, like wanting to work more with these founders. And I just really learned that that's what I loved. And I loved going through the idea maze with these founders, fumbling, stumbling. But that passion, that speed, and that like product obsession was just like all encompassing. And so I actually started a pre-seed fund, or helped start as like a generalist, like operator, did the legals, operations, and found the investments, raised capital. And the first fund was about $5 million, and we invested that into like early stage, between like 100 and 300K checks to help these people go full time. And I just fell in love, and it's something now that like I think about how lucky I am to like have found that, when I was a teenager in university, and then had the kind of, courage to go and do. All my friends were like, "What are you doing?" And that was the moment that I look back on that was so pivotal, and led to us meeting in BDO, because one of the things was to go find new startups, and I was in the BDO program, and I would get exposure, but I'd made so many mistakes. I was negotiating legal documents and I had no idea what the documents kind of even meant. I was trying to raise money on no track record, had, many no's. And we raised and invested that fund. And then after that fund, that's when I joined Blackbird. And so I was, just fresh out of university, and was given the opportunity to come in as an associate at Blackbird and, pursue that passion of early stage investing to like as much as I wanted to pursue it. And that was the opportunity. And I'm very, very grateful to Blackbird.
Do you think that you were always always interested in tech startups, or was there like a aha moment, particularly maybe being at River City Labs where you just were exposed to it so much?
Yeah, I think
like what kind of created that? All right, far out. Like I'm really passionate about this.
There was a couple people. I remember Vu from Go One came in and spoke. Who's particularly good at storytelling, and came from an area in Brisbane like Logan, if anyone knows, is not upper class wealthy area, and built one of Australia's unicorns from down in Logan. And I remember him coming in and telling the story, and also just getting his hands dirty. No one's above you in the startup world, and very equal.
Yeah, it's not like the classic corporate structure where
it wasn't like you do the work and then I go home and, I've got to pick my kids up from school. So then I hand the work to the next person, and then the next person does the work. And it was like, I really liked that cultural part. And so I remember vividly him speaking and coming in. And then, so I don't know if there's an exact moment, but there was just that energy you get, when you work with your team at Instant, and you just feel like we're onto something, and it's like it's changing the world in some way. We're building something new.
Yeah.
And I was just like, how do I get my hands involved in as many of these opportunities?
I think that energy is just so infectious, and then it breeds into, the new people that you hire on the team, and, you're hiring these people who have never worked in a startup before or never had a job before, and you're giving them a chance, and they become so instrumental to where the business goes, what you're working on, your success. And it's just like this energy, momentum. I think that's something you talk about a lot, is momentum is the answer to every challenge. And I think it's so true. As soon as you have momentum, if you can keep that momentum, you win. If you find a product that customers love, if you really think back, a lot of companies fail and a lot of really big companies fail because incumbents come in and they just have way greater momentum when it comes to product execution. And I think that's a huge trait when it comes to particularly early stage founders. There's this need to be early stage or scale up, even large companies. I feel like as soon as you start to fail, it's because you start to lose motivation, momentum slows down. And I feel like there's a very particular founder that Blackbird or just any investor looks for in trying to identify these types of people. But maybe personally from your perspective, like what types of founders, what traits do you look for when it comes to answering like this self-motivation, someone that's able to create momentum at the best of times, but also in the worst of times? Well.
It's a core thing. So a little bit more like broadly at Blackbird, we spend 80% of our time investing before revenue. So a lot of our time is at the very beginning. And so we are continually waking up hoping to meet people like you. And by that, I mean those people that have done a lot in a little. And it's very hard often to tell this from LinkedIn. And I think this is why people that are like ex-Slack, ex-Salesforce, ex-fancy company name, it's very hard to tell if they were like a doer and a creator of momentum at that company. And I think
How do you test for that?
I think let's take your case as the best example. 17, most would argue, well, you have no track record to base a decision off of. I would argue that is wrong. And, in your case, you traveled around Australia with your parents homeschooling and built a travel magazine to, tens of thousands of subscribers. They probably thought you were like some person driving your caravan around as, was well experienced. And like you did that all within like a 6 to 12 month period. And you had the hustle, you had the focus, you had the like ability to recognize the need. And, that's just one example. And then you had like the drop shipping website. And this is all before you were 17. And like it was just one after another. And actually, one of the kind of interesting indicators on particularly, younger in age founders is do their business models get better with time? And so I think you went from like a free subscriber magazine that was like very hard to scale content, and then you like had an e-commerce website that had a bit better margins and was like a bit better website, and then you realize that actually creating a software product that is like a product that we have great gross margin on is like, and maybe subscription revenue is like an even better business. So you would like, you see this step up in learning, and not only do you see the step up in learning, you see this, they've done a lot in a little. And maybe they've done a lot in a lot, but like particularly at that very beginning, it's like, have this person willed into existence a lot of stuff.
I saw this quote on X, Twitter yesterday, where it's like, you've almost got to prove traction before you have traction. And it's not always just about revenue. It's about, all right, the speed at which you're shipping products, or the crazy story of how you found, your co-founder, or how you got the first customer in the door. Like it really all kind of adds to the story, and being able to story tell, I think is a huge part. Because not only for investors, but in the early days, particularly most companies don't have revenue for a while. It's purely the way to both inspire investors to invest in you, customers to believe in you, and get the team to execute. Has your thinking about what makes a successful startup changed over the past couple of years, or particularly what you look for in founders?
I was thinking about this the other day, and I think there's a lot of hype going on in the Twitterverse in our world, like in technology. That's where a lot of people voice their opinions around these words like taste and speed. And I actually think those things they're permanent. Like they existed when Steve Jobs started Apple, and they exist today, and they're just as important as when he started Apple or when Bill Gates started Microsoft as they are you starting Instant a few years ago, or someone just starting their first company today. And so I think there's this idea of speed and taste are very much important. And then you have, again, that idea of focus and learning a lot in a little. We talk a lot about being a learn-it-all at Blackbird, and I think that's particularly important to come up that speeding curve, like whether it's business model, like I was talking about, or solving one problem in a startup just earns you the right to solve a bigger problem. And so like you have to constantly
Another 3 bigger problems, yeah.
And you're constantly facing this uphill battle, and so you have to learn quickly and become a domain expert, maybe hire someone to then take that over and then move on to the next big problem. And so you've got to be like curious, but also like this learn it all. And so I don't know that it's changed. I've just
Do you think that there's changes around, if you think back 5 years ago, if you spoke to anyone or any investor in Silicon Valley, they would say that the answer to winning is product. You must win at product to truly win in market. And I think the narrative around that has changed pretty significantly over maybe the last couple of months even. Maybe not even last couple of months. Particularly as you start to see these companies go from $0 to $100 million of revenue in, a year. I think it's going to be very interesting to see, is distribution truly the moat long term? Because that's the message at the moment. And will these companies that have grown so quickly actually survive in the long term?
Yeah, I think the interesting question that's unanswered and, we'll see is the answer, but do they have the ability to lock these customers in? A lot of them have high churn, maybe except for like the big enterprisey Harvey type ones. But do the Lovables of the world have an enduring business model? We'll see.
What's your thoughts on product winning versus you needing to win the distribution game?
Look, I think product is often the solver to many of the big, hairy problems in a startup. A lot of startups go through this journey of getting to their first $1 million in revenue and then seeing some version of churn arising, their first contracts come up for renewal, and ultimately a lot of startups treat it as a customer success issue, and which it can be, but hiring a lot of customer success folks eats into your gross margin, and really it's like a bit of a Band-Aid solution that can work, but it ultimately relies on the best product keeping the customer around. And so no one wants a leaky bucket. Product is the solver to that in many cases. And product, when done best, is this beautiful growth lever as well. If you think about the best products, they win via like word of mouth. And word of mouth is just a function of people having a delightful, beautiful experience with a product, so much so that they want to tell their best friend, their colleague, their mum and dad is like the ultimate example about this product. And I think, a few that I've had that experience with in the last year are like granola for note-taking, or, think of those kind of applications. And if you can do that, I think you get this free organic growth lever that goes to distribution. So like, I think product often leads to good distribution. But again, you've got to have like creative new distribution channels as well.
If you solve distribution, you got to solve product. If you solve product, I feel like the message around distribution is the answer to growth. I just think that it's wrong, because you need to have an incredible product as well. And if we think back to like our January board meeting, for example, where, we'd had an absolutely blockbuster year last year. And we remember getting to January and we still had this open question on, all right, we've got a really fast growing product. We've grown the team. We've invested very, very heavily in go-to-market. But our product team is basically the same size. We haven't answered any of our challenges around how do we move from being responsible for 3 or 4% of a merchant's revenue to like 20 or 30% of their revenue. How do we move to be so much more critical to their business? We've got challenges around, well, why doesn't a customer want to catch up with us every 30 days? And I think a lot of that comes down to just not investing in product. And if we look kind of this year, it takes so long to catch up if you don't invest in product early on. And so I still think it's going to be the answer long term. Like we ended up having to, we did triple our product and engineering team in Q1, and I think we tripled it again in Q2. And then by Q3, we had launched the product. And then now by going into Q4, now we have 400 brands on Instant AI, and it's now, we're now finally, up to like 20 or 30% of their revenue, churn significantly down in that cohort of customers, having to set up special projects to get all these customers upsold. Whereas we just spent too much time talking about it. And you try and band-aid it by hiring all these CS people, and then you think that you can band-aid it again by engaging with customers more, and then you can think you can band-aid it again by doing annual contracts or cheaper pricing compared to competitors. But truly the only way to win, in our case anyway, has been coming back to product. But I feel like as a startup, you kind of, and I think about so many of like my founder friends, I feel like you go through these waves of like 1 year, it's all about distribution. You get the product off the ground and you've got like 2 engineers and you just got to hustle and survive, and you've got to get to your first $1 million of revenue. Then when you get there, it's like, okay, wow, we need to invest in building a product that we can actually sell to larger businesses. And you go through this product phase again. Then it's like this distribution phase, then a product phase again. I feel like you dip in and out of it.
Yeah.
And it's just very interesting to see.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is underrated from your journey is just you've been able to dial in focus on the most critical, important thing at that point in time. And that maybe leads to this kind of wavy motion that you're talking about. But hey, over the long term, it's all up and to the right. It doesn't matter, like the stock market, the curve, the nature of the curve doesn't matter. It's just up and to the right.
How does Blackbird think about early stage investing? I mean, Blackbird's been on the journey with Instant since the very start. Actually, my mum was still the director of the company when Blackbird.
Yeah. You have to be 18 in Australia to be a director for those listening overseas.
I know, it's crazy. And I had to wait till my birthday. And I think it was a couple of days after my birthday, we signed the term sheet, or Blackbird funded us. And so you've been basically on my journey, but also the company's journey since the very start. How do you think about early stage investing today? You invest in a lot of young founders, experienced founders with revenue, no revenue, sometimes not even, or just early glimpses of a product idea. How do you think about it?
Yeah, so Blackbird was founded over a decade ago on the belief that, like Australia in the Olympics, we often have a startup in every race. And in many of those races, we actually win a gold medal. And so, but there was no venture community here in Australia back 10 years ago. And so Nikki Shivak and Rick Baker set out to found Blackbird, which was like a cup of water in the desert 10 years ago, to fund founders just like yourself. And it was those that are product obsessed, willing to build a global from day one product. I think that's something that's been ingrained in Blackbird. And to be frank and honest with you, it has led us to pass on some pretty incredible companies like Airwallex early on, and some of those companies that have to go jurisdiction by jurisdiction due to regulatory reasons or the like. So at Blackbird, we have a general approach to novel new products, and that can be in any form. We talk about wild ideas, and by wild idea we mean anything new and novel. So it could be Gilmore Space launching rockets up in Bowen. It could be satellites down in Adelaide with Flavia from Fleet, and it could be software like Canva or Safety Culture or Culture Amp, traditional SaaS products. But one of the kind of common thread is they're all novel and new, and they're all backed by what we call, wild heart founders that are pursuing some version of their life's work. They have an earned secret about the world that they're just like, their whole mission in life is to solve that and build a team to work around, creating something that changes the world. And in Blackbird's case, we were very lucky to have some very big companies early on in our life, and that's enabled us to raise bigger and bigger funds. So we spend, the headlines are always our funds are bigger, but we spend all of our time investing at the very beginning, and that's where I try to spend 100% of my time. Albeit that's not the case, but that's what I would like. And then we have fund structures such that as you succeed, as you've seen with Instant, we have the ability to keep investing in every round. So like with Canva, we've invested in every round. And the same is the case in many of those other companies. So it's a great source of capital for founders, and that's broadly how we think about it.
How do you, a lot of these companies now that are new and novel are in the AI space, how do you kind of evaluate these companies that are AI, maybe compared to previously?
So I think in the previous generation of call it software as a service companies, what people refer to as SaaS, it enabled people to do work. So you think CRMs like Salesforce or Canva enabled you to create a pitch deck or a deck. And then that kind of persisted for, call it 15, 10 years. And a lot of value was created there because it enabled you to be more productive. And I think that was probably the case with, instance first product as well. Like it just enabled higher conversion. It enabled an e-commerce merchant to be, more productive and help their purchase flows. And now in the AI world, intelligence by its, very nature can do things. We are intelligent people and can do things. And when software has intelligence, it is able to do the work. So not only is it enabling you to do the work, it is doing the work on your behalf. So all of a sudden you're like eating into labor, or, human knowledge work.
Sure.
And so we're seeing a lot of the big winners early on being like industries, frankly, that would never adopt technology, like lawyers, doctors. They would never put their credit card down for a product, and we would steer clear of it, frankly. And so AI is helping them do their work. Actually, to be more specific, it's automating the mundane administrative workflows of the part of their job that they did not get into that profession to do. So for doctors,
it's not like a lot of people are scared by it, but it's actually just enabling people to be better at what they should be doing.
Yeah. So let's take a doctor, for example. You got into the job most likely to, diagnose a patient and work through the complex history and be stimulated by that. That's what got you energized. You didn't get into being a doctor to write a note whilst the person's talking to you and then make sure that note was perfect and then write a referral letter. Like all of that is perfect for AI to do. And the same is the case in lawyers. And I actually think, like, to go more specific on instant, like that is our opportunity with marketing.
Sure.
Like marketing is a massive industry, just like both of those, with many mundane, retention flows, whatever it might be. The world is our oyster in this field, and I think we're perfectly placed to kind of attack
I think
that.
the most exciting thing, particularly in the AI sphere at the moment, is just how receptive brands or customers are becoming to implementing it in their business. Like if you think back 1 or 2 years ago, the biggest thing or the biggest challenge wasn't actually distribution. Obviously, product was still hard. I feel like the biggest thing or the biggest challenge was convincing people to buy it. They were scared about bringing it into their business. They were, particularly senior people were scared about it deleting people's jobs. And I think people are very rapidly realizing that it's becoming, it just enables their team to be so much more productive. They're actually able to focus on the most important things, but also just do things that has never been possible before. I mean, in Heidi's in case, it's no longer having bad notes from a consult. In Instant's case, you've never been able to send a unique email to every shopper before.
Yep.
So it's not even about deleting people's jobs. It's just doing things that have never been possible. And I think you see the companies that are moving quickly on this are the ones that are getting ahead.
Yep.
Brands that are implementing AI are getting ahead compared to their competitors.
I think the other like unique wave here is people are coming into the workforce out of uni using these tools, and then they're so much more productive than the prior generation that are in the workforce already, and they're looking at them going, how are you doing so much more than me? And then they're adopting, so it's like creating this adoption wave that's like fueling all of this growth. It's 100%. So good.
What do you think scares you most about AI though, particularly when it comes to startups at the moment?
So there's a Substack that's written by an investor over in the US, and he termed called it experimental ARR, so EARR. And I think that is true early on and maybe still today, and it will iron out over time. But a lot of people like this are coming in and being like, oh, I need to increase my boss has told me I need to increase my productivity, or I need to use ChatGPT, or I need to use some new tool to book 10 extra meetings than I was last week, or whatever the use case is. And so they're just putting their credit card down to pay $30 a month and then churning the next month when it doesn't increase their productivity.
Yep.
So we are seeing elevated rates of churn as compared to the prior generation of SaaS companies. at least at the very beginning of life. It's a little bit harder to tell with like the enterprise heavy customers, but like definitely in the bottoms up kind of companies we're seeing but then again, like companies like Canva did have a kind of high churn rate to begin life, and were criticized often for it. But there's no one right way to look at this, but churn is particularly high, and I think that scared a lot of people investing in AI companies, especially at the application layer.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think there's so much hype around these companies that have grown, wildly quickly. I think, and it's wrong to have a too hard of an opinion on where these companies are going to land. But it's going to be very interesting to see if they manage to maintain that revenue. And I think again, it comes down to product. If they can continue to be the best, they will continue to win. I want to go back to kind of the early days of Instant. So obviously we're very AI focused now, and I think we've got, across our entire customer base, I think, out of thousands of brands, we've got like 40 brands left that don't adopt Instant AI today. So we've had an incredible push on getting these brands onto AI, which has been crazy. And I think our existing customer base, having this huge existing customer base, has enabled us to get product adoption quickly. But our journey obviously started quite a few years ago, back to when we first met as Quick Checkout and then Instant. We had a lot of ups and downs as a company. I think, we've spent our first 6 months really focused on product. And I remember going to, I think, Bill's in Double Bay here in Sydney. Caught up with yourself and Nikki, who's one of the founders of Blackbird. And I remember coming in so pumped up, so excited about product. We'd made it a lot more professional. It started to actually work. I think it was still a very small team at this point, maybe 5 or 6 of us. And in that lunch, we yourself and Nikki were very excited about the product. But what's your kind of recount on that lunch? I feel like it was a very it was a very, how would you describe it? A very it
was a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
It was, roughly 6 months into the journey, and yes, you have to build a product, which you did tremendously well. Patrick on the team joined early as an engineer. You had Will as an epic engineer. You were able to build amazing product. But, we didn't raise like crazy amounts of money. So we needed to look at the future and be like, well, maybe let's say, I don't know what we had, but let's say we had 12 months runway. Well, in 6 months time, we need to raise more money. Otherwise, we're going to be dead, kind of. That's face the reality of it. And I think Nikki looked at you and Will and said, well, maybe about time you got some revenue. And
it was as straight as that.
Yeah. It was like direct. And I think, as being there at the time, and I think it was clear that voice was maybe inside of you, there, but you were just like, when's the right time to pull the trigger? And I think that comment might have given you like call it permission to just like go all in and focus. And I think yourself and Bryce, one of the first salespeople at Instant, kind of just went all in on getting to $1 million of revenue with checkout. And it was a brutal product to brute force to $1 million. Like, you had lengthy sales cycles. You were trying to take over the most valuable part of an e-commerce merchant's, it's their money maker. And you had to earn trust as like an 18-year-old. And you're like, oh my God. But I think, so to answer your question, that meeting was so pivotal because I think it lit that spark that has kind of stayed lit till this day. And hopefully that never goes out to go to the point of momentum. I think that spark was lit, and then you've carried that momentum forward in a beautiful, focused way. And then, I think, we did that for 12 months. I
remember going, we'd go for a walk and talk around the block, and it's like, Max, how are we going to increase response rates from these? We were doing all outbound sales.
Yeah, I think we came up with the idea of like sent from my iPhone, made it look like you were sending the email on the go, and that increased conversion by like some crazy amount.
We started putting sent from iPhone in the email signature to make it seem more personal to these brands, and that increased significantly.
Yeah.
And then the next week we'd have a new idea, and The week after, we'd have a new idea, and we just started to also win at the awareness game. I think it's one thing to have distribution and hit your head against the wall with outbound sales and sponsoring every event and etc. But you also need to win the awareness game. And I feel like we started to do that. We started to, be way better at case studies and getting early case study videos from Jeff at Global Foot Care when they came on board as our first brand. And, we started speaking on stage at events and, we started partnering with agencies and just starting to naturally win this awareness game. And then, so we got it to about $1 million, and that was around November of that year. And I remember going to Single O here in Surrey Hills and going, I feel like it's one thing to have a product market fit, but it's also another thing to have go-to-market fit. You need to figure out how to have this repeatable sales motion, repeatable growth. And I feel like that growth has changed for us and almost every startup over time. We're very focused on outbound sales in the early days, whereas now it's very marketing-led. But there was no clear strategy for checkout. We were competing with Shopify. We had the incumbents of ShopPay, very long sales cycles. And we thought, well, we built this ability to remember a shopper every time they come back to your website to give them a checkout experience. Why don't we just do that for marketing? And then last year was a pretty wild year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, if I think about the two pivotal moments, the first one enabled us not to die. We went and raised and were able to. And then the second pivotal moment in the journey is definitely the pivot to audiences, which I remember you sending me the team email that when you decided to go all in, you're kind of running two experiments for a little period just to see if it was liked. And then when you made that, you were very quick to be like, this is working. We're going all in. And the way you directed, I think maybe a 20 or 30 person team at the time, call it around 20, just towards that in a motivated way was just an incredible act of leadership. And I think executed to perfection. We grew, we were doing $1 million months that year, and from basically a cold start. And I think the best startups, the startups fail when they have bad customers, not that they can't build the product. And I think you were perfect to recognize that you didn't have that great customer because they didn't say yes quickly and repeatedly.
Completely agree. And I think one of the biggest challenges, as a venture-backed business, you have this expectation to consistently grow fast. Once you figure out growth, you need to grow faster. Once you figure out product, you need to build new product. And it's just this, hamster on a wheel. And I think a big part of the making that okay is kind of the founder-investor relationship. Maybe outside of Instant, how do you manage that amongst the brand or the companies you work with today? Because it's I would say almost majority of the time, the majority of things are going badly if you're a fast growing company. Otherwise, you're just not working on enough things at a time.
Yep.
You're not experimenting enough. You're not trying to figure out the next thing. 1 in every 10 things you do actually pulls off. So most of the time, 9 out of the 10 things are pretty negative. Or you've wasted a bunch of money, or you've hired the wrong person, and it's pretty bad at the best of times.
I don't have a silver bullet here, but for the fact that venture is a relationship-driven business, and each of the founders that I work with and each of the founders that the whole Blackbird investment team are fortunate and lucky enough to work with, everyone has their own unique style, and it's a case-by-case kind of version of the relationship. But the thing we take the most pride in is, in the toughest of times, or when you're, churn is going through the roof, or someone's importance left the business, or something bad, whatever the most bad thing that can happen, is that can you tell us that and we be there to help you through that? I think that is the barometer of is the relationship at a good enough point? And myself personally, the relationships take a different form, and it might be WhatsApp communication, on a weekly, fortnightly basis. But I'm a hater of recurring meetings. So in none of them do I have this forced monthly catch up, where, hey, Liam, tell me what's going on. It's more just let's catch up and what are your biggest, hairiest problems. And
because the things you care about, even for Instant, change all the time. 1 minute we're really focused on retention. And then, a couple of months later, we're actually just focused on US growth now. And then a couple of months later, it's all right, well, now we're building our leadership team. And so to have these reoccurring meetings that are always just about the same metrics it becomes super invaluable.
Yeah, and I think like to the point earlier, the problems just change with time. And one of the bad indicators of a startup is if they come to that meeting every time with the same problem.
Well, yeah, that's something I learned from you. And
Yeah.
so it's okay to have problems, but don't let it be the same problem consistently. Don't come to the board meeting for your entire year with the exact same problem every time.
Yeah, it's like there's like an R squared of 1 correlated to like having the same problem in a board meeting 4 board meetings in a row, like to failure. Yeah, it's a strong indicator of not a good company.
What do you think is the most underrated trait of successful founders you work with today?
It's not underrated, and it's very common or commonly talked about, but it's this genuine desire to care and be polite and kind that's combined with this deep personal desire to win. And when you combine 2 of them, you get a leader that can inspire and bring team investors, everyone else on the journey. But actually, all that matters in a culture is winning. Winning solves all problems. People just want to win at the end of the day. And so, like, you have to be deeply motivated by winning. And doesn't have to show in, like, a, masculine, like, toxic way. It can come up in any shape or form, but you have to have this deep desire to win. And I think when you combine that with just being a great human, that compounds, builds in drops, and then you create someone that can be a generational CEO.
Max, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Liam. It's been a thrill.